Hello, welcome to another episode of Music Worth Buying. My name is TJR.
My name is Robert Kinsler.
And we are here this time to talk about a film.
A film, yeah.
As opposed to an album. But we are talking about a film about one of the greatest rock and roll bands in the world. And a film that has not seen the light of day for some time now.
Yeah, I think it's been out of circulation legally, I mean, as far as commercially available, since the 1980s, when it was out on VHS tape, right? Am I correct in that?
You could see it on VHS tape, but also if you had a Laserdisc player, if you remember Laserdisc players, it was available on Laserdisc.
It was,
if
wow.
I'm not mistaken, it was available on Laserdisc. I could be wrong about that, but I believe you could also get it on Laserdisc. And that's probably, I think, the best kind of quality copy you could find.
Yeah,
was on
I'm sure.
Laserdisc.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah.
We're talking about the movie Let It Be. And the film came out in 1970, but was recorded during the late 60s.
Right. It was. I think filmed beginning in early January of 1969, toward the tail end of the Beatles' run as a band.
Yeah.
You know. So.
And in case you're not familiar or with the film, the original intent, the idea came from Paul McCartney, and he had felt in order to re-energize the band, they needed to get back to their roots again, back when they would play live, and back when they would record their albums live.
Yeah, without all the ornate orchestrations and things like that.
That they'd grown used to since they had stopped touring. And the idea was that they would rehearse up some new songs. And they would rehearse them as a live band. They would get them together to where they could perform them live. The original intent was it was going to be, I believe, a TV broadcast.
Right, I think for the BBC or something, right?
And then it was going to lead to a live concert performance, of which the original intent for that live concert performance was going to be much grander in scale, and it didn't happen. Instead, we got a motion picture documentary, and they did a little improvised rooftop concert at the end of the film where they performed the songs live.
Right.
And that would have been the last time the Beatles performed live anywhere.
It's legendary. I mean, that is the last time they performed together as a band live,
And the first time they performed together live in in a couple of years, since they had quit touring. Prior to working on Sgt. Pepper.
Right, exactly, Leading up to this episode today, we talked about, I hadn't seen the movie in I don't know how many years. It had been so long, and since we're talking about it now, the movie actually got me a little depressed because it doesn't outright chronicle the Beatles' breakup, but there's definitely foreshadowing some of the issues. There's one scene, and I don't want to give away everything, but there's one exchange where George Harrison is basically saying, look, if you want me to play something, I can play it. If you don't want me to play it. And that's a very... here's George Harrison, who I consider one of the, the key guitarists of the 60s and basically most influential guitarist of all time, basically saying, hey, I'll sit this one out, Paul. And at least in the version of the DVD, or this cut of the film, you do get the sense Paul, like you said, Paul's kind of orchestrating this to come together, but it doesn't seem like all the Beatles are 100% on board. And so there are times where if you're a really huge Beatles fan, it's hard to see these four personalities, these four talents that don't get along famously like they do in the early years, when things were definitely different.
Unlike when you saw them as the Mop Tops, and they were definitely like
this is not the Ed Sullivan. This is not the Ed Sullivan show.
Not the Ed Sullivan Beatles. No, not the Hard Day's Night Beatles, which of course was the Hard Day's Night Beatles is kind of a fictionalization of the Beatles. Let's be real here. But even still, when you saw them in interviews, there was this camaraderie between them. You could tell, these are four guys that have been through a lot together already.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're like tight together, not only as musicians but just tight as mates, as to use the term, the British term, as mates. We would say buds probably here in the U.S., but as mates they were just very tight. And so I'm sure Paul's intentions were good.
Oh, I think they were. I think they were good.
Let's get back to performing live again. And I guess what ended up happening is the sessions didn't work out the way they wanted. There was some reconsideration about what to do. My understanding is that, according to an interview I heard with George Martin, Paul called him and said, George, we want to make another album. We want to do it in the old way. Even John wants to do it. And that was Abbey Road. And Abbey Road was the last album they recorded together. Then the tracks for Let It Be were then put together and then with some extra production from Phil Spector, released as an album after Abbey Road.
Yeah, and that's...
in 1970. Now, by that time, I think when Let It Be came out, the Beatles had already broken up.
They had, as far as I recall, they had,
I always thought it was interesting that on the back of that album cover, it said, in the notes on the back, this is a new phase Beatle album, as most of the tracks were performed live. And I was like, new phase?
Yeah.
And it's like, of course, I'm looking at this in hindsight as a kid reading this, but even then, the Beatles have already broken up. With new phase. They broke up.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, the thing about this movie is, it is a different Beatles. You know, it's the same Beatles that we love, but they look different than earlier in their career. You know, you're watching them work these songs out. You have this fly on the wall kind of perspective, and sometimes the camera angle is literally shooting down. So it's almost like you're looking in, and you shouldn't even be there, and you have these glimpses. And I guess this is only a fraction of the film that was shot. You know, it was shot on 16 millimeter film, where basically the cameras were rolling. This is, at least according to Wikipedia and some other sources, there was hours and hours of film shot. And what you get as a movie, as I recall, isn't it about 90 minutes or so, including the rooftop?
Yeah, it's not terribly long.
It's not terribly long. So a lot of things are brought in. But again, you do appreciate, because you do see how they work out. And just to watch, you know, like George Harrison do a solo, or watch Ringo behind the kit, and how he's is a musical drummer working out, hey, how come my drums and hand? And there's kind of these glimpses that you only get in this movie, and I have not got those kind of glimpses anywhere else, so it is worth seeing, definitely.
Now, you had said you hadn't seen it in a long time. Now, myself, I had never seen it before.
Wow.
Ever. I had seen a few little scenes here and there, but like we said before, it's not been commercially available. And the reason I've seen it now is because of a bootleg copy.
Yeah.
And we both watched this bootleg copy. And so I saw it for the first time. Do you want to give your impressions of the film first? I mean, you've given some about about just how how it looks, as far as you see the Beatles, you see foreshadowing of the conflicts that are to come.
Yeah.
But it's just as a film, just as a review of the film. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You know, as a film, the Beatles have so much charisma, so much talent, that even, you know, I think people widely acknowledge that Magical Mystery Tour is not Hard Day's Night, you know.
Well, it's not their proudest moment.
It's not their proudest moment. But even that, you know, you think about the music, like I'm the Walrus or Magical Mystery Tour. I mean, the songs are so amazing that you can forgive just about anything. And that's what I feel like here, to watch them work out, you know, Two of Us, or have the, you know, to watch George and Ringo working on Octopus's Garden, and some of these magical moments where these songs, to see these songs in their formation, I mean, it's just magical, because like I said, you are a fly on the wall. You're this observer that doesn't belong in the room, but yet there you are. You know, and those kind of things make this movie really worth seeing, and it does go by very, very quickly, especially when, you know, the rooftop scene probably takes up, what would you say, probably about 30% of the movie or so.
I would say that's probably true. The concert at the end.
So the glimpse, so the studio sessions are maybe about an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour. So they do go by very quickly. There are scenes like where maybe three of the Beatles are playing a song, and then you see Yoko and John dancing and things like. There's these kind of surrealistic moments too that just seem so different than everything else that happened when Brian Epstein was alive, and kind of. You know, kind of trying to more, how would you say, market the Beatles or brand the.
Yeah.
This is an unbranded. This is a Beatles that's not branded. Like I said, you're seeing them in the twilight of their career as a band. But do I? You know, you're asking me, what do I think of the movie? The movie is very good. It's not the best documentary ever made. It's not the best movie that the Beatles ever made. But yet, it's the only glimpse we have of the Beatles like this. You know,
I would say that's the primary reason to watch it, is the only glimpse we get of them working together in this way, because we don't have footage of them working on Revolver or Sgt. Pepper
or Rubber Soul.
We have some audio out. We might hear audio chatter from the recording sessions, just some audio chatter, but that's it.
Yeah.
As far as my view of the film, of course, I should mention, has no narration. It has no interviews. Which is jarring, I think, for today's movie audiences when it comes to a documentary.
Good point.
We're used to narration. We're used to some interviews. It's just like you said, fly on the wall, watching all of this happen. Now, as I watched it, I had to wonder at times, how entertaining would this be, or interesting would this be, to somebody who is not a musician? Because my personal feeling about creation, creating music, being in the studio, I think, is boring to anybody unless you are taking part in it. It's kind of how I have always thought. Now, maybe that's just me, but I've always thought that recording sessions are boring to anyone who's an outsider. When this film begins, literally, they are working these songs up from square one. Someone has a bit of an idea, the others don't know the song, and they're trying to figure it out and work it out. This film does truncate this process, but even then I think to myself, yeah, this might be really boring. Unless you're a hardcore Beatles fan, or unless you're a musician, this might be kind of boring. Just my personal feeling about it. It's not boring to me. To me, it's fascinating.
Yeah, to me, it's fascinating. Yeah, just even watching like the parts that George or John like when John's playing slide guitar. It's like I just don't ever remember seeing John Lennon during the Beatles play slide. I mean, there's some really priceless moments. But like you said, I am kind of agreeing with you. You're kind of seeing it as, oh, so that's what he was doing there, or oh, that's who was playing that. I know there's musicologists out there that know who played every note.
Yeah,
you know who did what. But I mean, this is. If you're a Beatles fan and a musician, you're going to love this movie just for those moments, I think.
Oh yeah, at the very least, it'll be fascinating.
Yeah.
But I do have to wonder about, for a lot of people, how much it will be. The other thing that's just very kind of revealing is this is a band that has not played live together for a couple years.
Right.
They've gotten a bit rusty. That's to be expected. When I watched it, I felt that Paul and Ringo were the least rusty.
I would definitely agree with that.
I felt like they were more seasoned. For whatever reason, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Since none of them have played live together anywhere else, I felt like they just came off as more seasoned.
Yeah.
I felt that John and George came off a lot rustier. And so there is this process where they're building up the songs. It's very rough. And of course, if you know how these songs turn out, you know where it's going to go. But at first, it's very rough. You see them about at the halfway point where, okay, it's getting a lot stronger. Then you see them perform the songs live in the studio. You know, and a couple of the songs that are not in the rooftop concert, like The Long and Winding Road,
right.
We just see them play it live in the studio.
Yeah.
And of course, Billy Preston is there on keyboards.
Yeah, which is very cool.
Apparently, the moment Billy Preston was brought into the sessions, apparently everybody kind of upped their game a little bit, and everybody became a little bit more energized.
And you notice how enthusiastic he's like Paul in here. He's very enthusiastic. He's like, "Wow, this is great," and I think it was infectious what he did. You know, they never interview him, like you were saying. There's no interviews. You can just feel it, and especially as a musician, you can just feel the energy he brings into the sessions.
Yeah,
you know?
And I think it was necessary because so many of their songs for too long had required more instrumentation than the four of them could do. So having that fifth person there on keys, I think, really helped.
It did
bring it up there because oftentimes they all play keys to at one level or another, and in the studio, well, okay, I'll play the keys here. Now I'll play the guitar, or I'll play the bass. Easy to even Ringo could play keys.
Yeah.
So, I shouldn't say even Ringo. That's kind of disparaging to drummers.
Yeah.
But we don't think of Ringo.
Yeah.
As
and you see him playing keyboard.
Drums.
You see.
He played keys too.
Yeah. And then you see Paul playing guitar. You see. It's just such a revealing documentary. I would love to see an expanded edition of this thing. I don't know how much Paul and Ringo would be willing to let go out the door, so to speak. But boy, obviously there would be the film director's cut here. But originally, I think I read on Wikipedia too, or I read somewhere online, originally there was a version of this movie that was about a half hour longer, and then it was cut down to the present length. So, I mean, it's obvious there's more footage because, like you said, sometimes you'll see the beginning of a song, then all of a sudden it seamlessly blends into the song where more of the Beatles are performing it, and it's a more embellished arrangement, more fully. So it'd be interesting. Yeah, more fully realized. So it would be interesting to see a longer version, but like you said, it may then even get more down in the weeds. But as far as like guys like us that have been in the studio a lot, it would be very fascinating to see those moments.
Yeah.
So.
Once again, this film is only available as a bootleg now, and of course, it's not that hard to get a hold of. If you want to watch this, it's not that hard to find with today's internet world that we live in. But I guess the question is, why hasn't it been released commercially to DVD or to Blu-ray? It's one of the last major projects the Beatles were involved in during their recording career that has not been released.
Exactly.
Even like you said, Magical Mystery Tour not considered their proudest moment as a film. The songs are fantastic, but the film, I did watch that.
Yeah.
Not their proudest moment is what I thought as I finished that. I said, yeah, I don't know how many times I'm going to need to watch this. Songs are great, though.
Yeah, the songs are great.
I would say this film is more interesting than Magical Mystery Tour. That's for sure, as a film.
As a film.
And an expanded version would be interesting, or at least a version where we have a lot more additional footage.
Like as extras. Maybe like there's a full performance. Let's say even if the performance isn't flawless, maybe there's a full-on performance of The Long Winding Road, or, you know, Two of Us, or whatever, you know, in the studio. You know, or maybe you get the first version and the last version, whatever the film captured. But, it is, watching it again now, and the Beatles are the one band that I think we both agree are at the pinnacle for us as music fans and as musicians. And then any glimpses you have of the Beatles, you know, like this, in this kind of setting, it's just magical and monumental for me anyway.
But let's go back to the question. Why hasn't it been released?
Yeah, I mean, I have to think that it was kind of Paul's baby, the whole project. I'm thinking he must have reasons. Maybe he's, either he hasn't had the time to commit, because I know there's been reports that the director thought it was coming out around 2013, and here we're recording this in the middle of 2017, and there's still no announcements or any indication that something's coming.
That it's coming out soon.
You know.
Now, from what I've read, now of course, first of all, let me back up for one moment. Whenever a Beatles release comes out, it has to be approved of by Paul, Ringo, and then
Yoko and
Yoko and Olivia, the widows of George and John.
Right,
all of them have to approve of it. So it's not coming out unless all four of them approve of it. From what I've read, Ringo and Paul have both mentioned, maybe we should release this, maybe we shouldn't. I've read reports that there is some concern about the fact that it puts the band in a negative light, because this was the time period where they were having a lot of difficulties getting along, and at one point during these sessions, this was filmed, but it is not in the actual documentary. George did just say, "I'm leaving the band."
Yeah, and I didn't bring it up, but that is true.
He did say that.
And they had to get him back with some conditions, right, as I recall?
I don't know about any conditions, but I know that at one point they had considered bringing in Eric Clapton to replace him. John Lennon was even quoted as saying, if George isn't back by such and such a date, we'll let Eric play. Eric Clapton, years later in interviews, has stated, when asked about this, said, well, that's absurd because he and I are mates. George and I are mates.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to do that to him.
Yeah, they were very good friends at this time. Yeah, at this period. Yeah,
I'm not going to just come in and start filling in for him like that. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But so part of it, I think, might be the fact that it might put the Beatles in a negative light. Now, I've also read reports where Paul has stated, well, I have no problem with it coming out. A lot of people have thought, well, it's Paul. He's going to look bad. It makes him look bad. As I watched it, I really saw him trying to re-energize the band.
I agree with that, yeah. And he's the one that's most enthusiastic in there. And I don't think he's even trying to, I think, connect with, and while we're discussing it, Kurt, I don't think any of us want to give, either of us want to give away too many things, but Yoko is literally, attached at the hip to John. I mean, figuratively, right? So, I mean, I talked about the dancing, but she's in the studio, and it does bring a weird dynamic. At least I perceive it. But again, we don't know. We haven't seen all the footage, but maybe that's part of it too. Maybe Yoko, doesn't want. Who knows why? But I wish it would come out.
Who knows who doesn't want it seen and for what reasons?
But I think there are obvious. It should have been released by now with Blu-ray technology and all that stuff, and they can enhance the sound. I recently saw a Prince concert from the '80s that was remastered, and they did an amazing job. They could make Let It Be look and sound fantastic.
I'm sure they could.
Yeah.
But just to get back to what I was saying earlier, from what I've read, Paul said, well, I'm not opposed to it coming out. I'm the one who will probably come off looking the worst for it, in his opinion.
That's interesting. Maybe they all think that about themselves, yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? And maybe it's just a simple matter of just the fact that it might what's the word I'm looking for?
Tarnish their legacy.
Tarnish the Beatles brand. Tarnish the brand. The positive feelings that everybody has about the music. For fans to watch this film where there's some tension going on behind the scenes while it's being made. Who knows? It's a possibility. At any rate, though, if you do want to see the film, as someone who's just seen it now for the first time, I'll agree. It's a fascinating glimpse. And certainly, it's not A Hard Day's Night. It's not Yellow Submarine.
Yeah, it's not.
Not Help.
Yeah.
It's certainly better than Magical Mystery Tour. And I just have to just kind of preface that if you're not a musician, you might find the first part a little bit boring, possibly, maybe not. But the second half you're going to enjoy a lot more when the performances are more polished.
There's no doubt. And you know the whole segment on the rooftop. I mean, they influenced you too. I think with their rooftop stuff they did.
Yeah, I've heard that's a direct
stuff. Yeah, it's a direct
riff on that.
I mean, it's like everything the Beatles did was so profound. I mean, not just with their music and their influence there, but even something like this and doing this realistic video, like you said, sans interviews, or you know, it's just interesting how they came up with this idea. Hey, let's just bring the cameras in and let them capture whatever they capture.
Yeah.
And again, they were ahead of their time in doing something like this, and I think it does deserve to be out. Yeah. You know, and I'd love to see it because we've both seen like a bootleg DVD. I'd love to see it in surround and get that kind of great treatment. You know,
I've read enough about the Beatles, and most serious fans have read enough about the Beatles that they are familiar with the darker sides that have come out throughout their careers. The darker sides of their personalities that have come out throughout their careers, the problems they've had. What family gets along 100% perfect? What family? Your family, my family?
Yeah, no, of course not.
Whose family does?
Yeah.
You know, I think for the most part, fans are realistic enough that they can, accept this. We understand this. And there have been docudramas put out that chronicle this. I don't even know how authorized or unauthorized these docudramas are, but there have been certainly films that have chronicled this throughout the years, made for TV movies. I know I've seen at least one or two.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think it's anything new. I think it should be. I would love to see it released on Blu-ray and DVD. You know, I'd love to see a new release. I'd like to see additional footage. And I think we're all grown up enough at this point. Boy, I better be grown up enough at my age. That we can, we can handle this.
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah.
So, anyways, though, have you watched Let It Be? What are your thoughts on it? Would you like to see it come out now on Blu-ray and DVD? Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Till next time, I'm TJR.
And I'm Robert Kinsler.
We'll see you again. Bye.
See you later, everybody.